talking about the NAS conference and Hannah Belcher's talk on masking. She also says, when she's talking about ways to try and stop masking or limit masking, and she says that she's not recommending it's something that all autistics need to do or should do. She just was putting forward some ideas about ways maybe you don't need to mask so much, or in certain settings stop masking if you want to. But she said that she made a point that if there aren't problem behaviours there, then you don't need to be changed. So she made a point about a parent at one talk where she was giving a talk. A parent who's I think it's their grandchild or something. I can't remember. No, it might be grandparents. No, it wasn't. Sorry. No, it's a parent whose autistic kid was asking inappropriate questions of their grandparents or something, like asking questions or too many questions, and the family was embarrassed because the kid was asking all these inappropriate questions and they wanted to know ways to get the kid to stop doing that. And Hannah said that why did they need to do that if it wasn't actually harming other people, and maybe it was the family themselves need to kind of reassess, maybe look at things a bit differently, because maybe they need to be a bit more lenient and maybe not be quite so embarrassed sort of thing. I'm not too sure what to think about that. I can see her point, but then I can also understand, obviously, it depends on what questions are being asked. Like, obviously children do need to be taught things, because that it might not be in that child's best interest, not to learn certain manners, because if they grow up and they aren't taught those manners, that could get them into trouble. I know that when I was younger, I used to do that, and I still actually do it sometimes, because sometimes I just do. I still can be inappropriate. I can't mask all the time. That's the thing. But it's about mask management. But I do feel that it is still important for autistics as they grow up to learn these certain behaviours, because it could get you into trouble if you don't know certain behaviours. And so I don't know if it's in a child's best interests, really, not to be correct. It depends, like I say, obviously it's inappropriate. She didn't really say what sort of questions were being asked. I mean, it might be that the questions were harmless. It depends really on the questions, but obviously everyone's got different definitions of harmless, and maybe these questions weren't as, like, the child does need to know, because it might not be, what I mean is, it might be that child's grandparent just needs to deal with their embarrassment a bit better, but say if that same child was asking those questions of their teacher or something else, like, yeah, maybe they do need to be taught, but it's the way they're being taught. They should be taught in a way that makes sure that you're not making the child feel bad, or that you're not, it's the way you do it, I think. There's sensitive ways of teaching children, which doesn't hurt their self-esteem. So, but I do feel that, it's probably not in a child's interest not to have any guidance. So I'm not sure I completely agree with Hannah that, certain behaviours might need to be modified, but I think it is the way you do it. So, because, and also I'd argue that actually no autistic on earth can ever stop masking completely. The reason being, I mean, unless you say, obviously, though autistics who have like really profound intellectual disabilities, for example, won't have any concept of masking. But if you are, like, say, intellectually aware and things like that, and you want to try and get on in life, you do need to mask to some extent, because basically, if I were to monologue about my interests all the time, that's me not masking, and I would love to do that. And that would be me being most natural. I do it with my dad, and I annoy him a lot. But like I was saying earlier, like I feel, I guess should be at least one person I'm allowed not to mask to, otherwise, But what I'm saying is, like, say when I was like at my voluntary work, if I didn't have any masking on at all, then I would end up winding people up so much, and I wouldn't be getting on with anyone. And so I'm not sure. If I was like my complete self, I'm going to get loads of negative attention, and that would actually end up being more stressful. And I know quite a number of autistics make this point, actually sometimes not masking can be more stressful, because you end up getting unwanted attention, and then you have to manage that. So sometimes actually masking can be the lesser of two evils. And as I said in my other video, I'm not always that successful at masking, and I can only do it for certain amounts of time, and I'll still end up monologuing about my special interest eventually, because I can't hold to mask forever. Even when I was at voluntary work, I would sometimes talk about my special interest for too long. But if I was to completely not mask, then I think I would get into trouble. Because I was trying not to do it all the time. It's just that sometimes, can't do it all the time. But Yeah, I feel there are sort of ways to kind of mask in a way that doesn't use up too much energy. Maybe it's about learning what can go. For example, eye contact. You don't need to make eye contact, for example. You can not make eye contact to still be perfectly polite. You just need to tell the other person that you find eye contact difficult so they don't take offence, sort of thing, or advocate for yourself. But I do feel that eye contact is one of these things you don't need to mask. So it's just sort of like finding things that maybe you don't need to mask, but then kind of like, because that will make it easier then to mask the other stuff. It's kind of like about not masking completely, but kind of masking enough to get by, really, in certain settings, but also having spaces where you don't need to mask at all. So it's finding a balance, I would say. I disagree with this idea that some autistics say, oh, we should just take off the mask because it's that easy. And often these autistics, by the way, are actually the more privileged ones, whose actual natural self is more tolerated by society. And for them, taking off a mask might be more achievable, and they also often have lots of influence, and they tend to be more able to have the privilege of doing that. But not all autistics are so lucky, and it depends on how, in inverted commas, how I'm trying to think of the right language to use. How inappropriate, I'll use that word, how inappropriate your behaviours could be beneath the mask. So those autistics whose behaviour beneath the mask isn't that inappropriate might still be able to get by and be liked by people if they advocate. But for autistics who may be, who beneath the mask are a bit more potentially inappropriate, like maybe who will end up talking way too much about their interests, who will end up kind of cutting across other people and interrupting if they completely let loose. You know what I mean? It depends what is beneath the mask at the end of the day. I can be so inappropriate beneath that mask because the real me is really inappropriate. I'm not gonna shy away from that. The real me is really, really inappropriate, and I still struggle even when I'm masking. But at least when I'm masking, I don't get weird looks. So, yeah, you have to think about these things. What would happen if I stopped masking? I'd get way too much attention. I wouldn't be able to deal with that. I wouldn't like that. So I have to mask for my own survival. Oh yeah, she talks here. Oh yeah, interestingly, she makes the point that autistic people judge other autistics more positively because they understand each other and they come from the same social culture. Now, this is where I disagree with Hannah Belcher, or it might be the case for some autistics. Maybe some autistics do experience that, and good for them. But I haven't experienced that personally. I'm not denying what Hannah Belcher is saying. Clearly, some autistics might experience that, but it can't be the case for all autistics. It's not the case for me. And this idea that autistic people judge other autistic people more positively because they understand them and tolerate the same social culture, I feel is a bit of a myth. I find it very hard to tolerate some other autistics because they wind me up the wrong way. Some of their traits backfire on me, particularly the ones who, like certain voices, I've talked about this before, on a sensory level really great, and I'm sure my voice grates on some people, but some autistics, their mannerisms and I don't know, the way they come across kind of irritate me. And just because I'm autistic, it doesn't mean I'm going to understand or tolerate them better. I do struggle with theory of mind and like empathy and stuff like that, so that might come into it as well. I do find it quite hard sometimes to get on with people who I can't tolerate. And it can wind me up the wrong way, and I can end up having meltdowns or like cutting off from them. So just because they're autistic doesn't mean I'm going to tolerate them better at all. So I do find that idea a little bit strange, really. This idea that just because you're autistic, you're going to judge other people more positively because you understand and come from the same social culture. This is a very neurodiversity concept, by the way, this whole tribal thing, that just because you've got the same diagnosis, you're automatically going to get along. And I really, really don't understand that idea at all. Like, I see people as people, so for me, it comes with a whole baggage. I don't just see it, I see past the diagnosis. The diagnosis isn't what means I'm going to connect with someone. It's nice to be in touch with other autistic people, just so you can share experiences and stuff and get some peer support. But in terms of actual connection, it's irrelevant whether or not they're autistic, whether or not I'm going to get on with them. I get on with quite a few autistic people, admittedly, who go to the group I go to, and we get on. But equally, there are other autistics that I don't particularly like or want to get on with. So, it's a personal thing. It's got nothing to do with a label, diagnosis. But let me know what you think. She talks about moving away from idea of deficit in autism and seeing it as a different social culture. I really disagree with that. Autism is a deficit. I have a social deficit. I have deficits in social interaction. You know, I'm not going to shy away from that. I'm honest and open about that. I think it's very important to be honest and open about your weaknesses and about your, you know, I just don't think it's good to hide things. Like, I'm open about it. I have a deficit. I have a deficit in social interaction. I have a deficit relating to other people. That's just the way it is. You know, that's just the way my brain is. That's just the way I've been born. There's nothing I can do about it. I try my hardest, but I'm always going to have a deficit. That's just a fact of life. There's nothing to be ashamed of about that. You know, people are born with all sorts of impediments. Could have been worse. But I don't understand why we need to stop pretending autism is a deficit. And also, I kind of feel it's quite ableist, potentially, because it's almost like saying, oh, we're not like those people over there with deficits. Oh, no, we're not like them. Because, you know, it's almost like kind of separating disabled people into different groups, the ones with deficits and the ones who don't have deficits, which I feel is quite ableist and kind of elitist as well. And I feel it would be more inclusive, and like, if you want to think about building solidarity and kind of, you know, a kind of sense of cohesion, why are we trying to separate ourselves from people who are less fortunate? Like, what I mean is like, deficit isn't a bad thing, and by people saying, oh yeah, they don't have deficits, it's kind of like saying that they want to kind of like sort of almost see themselves as different to people who are more impaired. And for people who are more impaired, they can't pretend it's not a deficit, because for them it really is. And I just feel it is quite elitist, and that's another aspect of the neurodiversity movement I can't stand. But let me know your thoughts. Hang on, just drop this down. I mean, having deficits is part of the human experience, you know. Weaknesses are part of the human experience, you know. And I feel we should embrace it. It's like yin and yang. Can't be all positive. All positive is just as bad as all negative, you know. We need to be balanced. I just feel about hiding negatives and hiding. Look, I don't know really. Yeah, hiding it in a sense, like a shadow, if you like, is part of modern Western philosophy. It's kind of feel good. Oh, everything's hunky dory, positive. Yeah, it's all positive. Yeah, let's just focus on the strengths, can-do attitude, and all of that. But actually, that can end up actually harming our mental health. I feel. I'm a realist. I like to face things head on. That's just how I am, and yeah, I just feel it's more healthy actually. But yeah, it's just one part of the neurodiversity movement I kind of can't relate to, and which kind of like grates on me a bit. But you know, everyone's got the right to their views. Yeah, she talks about, you can take, by the way, the camouflaging autistic traits questionnaire if you're interested, which is whole 2019. I'm not sure if you can access that online, but there is such a thing as a camouflaging autistic traits questionnaire. She's also got a website, hannahbelcher.com, and her book, Taking Off a Mask, is meant to be released this year, September 2022, and I would like to read it, although it's probably quite expensive, so the library will probably have a copy. I can't use the library at the moment because I'm OCD, but I would like to read it. So yeah, we'll see. But okay, so I'm going to finish now, and I'm going to come back next time to talk about Emily Katie's talk. So there's still a lot to cover from the NAS conference. So I'll speak to you again very soon. So thank you for watching.